called in yet.
Okay.
So I'm going to start us off. Welcome everyone to the Monday, July 19th, 2021 meeting of EBCE's CAC meeting. And Adrian, can we please have roll call?
Yes, thank you. Member Eldridge. Member Eldridge?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Present.
Yes, thank you. Member Laundrie? Member Liu?
Present.
Member Swaminathan?
Yeah.
Member Talria?
Present.
Member Lachman, well, he's not a member yet. Member Pacheco? Member Souza?
Yeah, and can we note that Ernie
alternate.
is not here tonight and Mickey Souza is the alternate that will be the official person.
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'm here. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Member Butzenberg? And we have as a, your president serving as an alternate, Ratia.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Chair Front?
Present.
And Chair Center?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Great. Thank you. The next item on our agenda are public comments. This is at a point that anyone can address the CAC on anything not on our agenda. Do we have any speaker slips?
We have no speaker slips at this time.
But I do see a hand raised. Nope, it went up and down. I
That
just
was
saw
from
Cynthia.
Member Laundrie, who I am indicating is present.
Great. So Cynthia, we have you as present and you are now a panelist.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hope
right.
everybody, thank you.
So we've officially started, Cynthia. We are now under item C3. I see no public comment. So we're moving on to the approval of the minutes from June 14th, 2021. Do I have
Motion to
anybody
approve.
that has comment? Sorry, I missed that.
I moved approval and somebody else seconded.
I'll second.
Yeah, I did. Okay. Oh, never mind.
So Member Eldred put a motion in for approval and Member Frank seconded it. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none. Then as written, can you please call the roll, please?
Yes, thank you. Member Eldridge?
Yes.
Member Landry?
Yes.
Member Liu? Member Swaminathan?
Yes.
Member Talria?
Yes.
Member Souza? Member Souza?
Apologize, Susan. Yes.
Yes. Member Ratia?
Yes.
Thank you. Vice Chair Frank?
Yes.
And Chair Sutter?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Great, thanks. So the next item is the CAC Chair Report, and I've got several things that I want to share with everybody tonight, and they cover a variety of topics. So the first one being is there was a special meeting a week ago, I have to look exactly, for the EBCE board. And at that special meeting, the board gave EBCE the okay to move ahead towards purchasing a building that'll house EBCE in the city of Oakland. The building is at 251 8th Street. It is about a block from the Lake Merritt BART station. So you'll be hearing about it at some point in the future if the sale and all the transaction goes through as expected. It's not a done deal at this point. EBCE staff and Nick and others are working directly with the building owner and others to make that occur, but they were given the okay to move ahead. The second thing is there's going to be an environmental and social justice metrics public meeting on September 2nd from 6 to 8 p.m. So mark your calendars now, but you will be getting information about it prior to the meeting. This is the meeting, the public meeting that I've mentioned in the past. Jane and I have been working with JP to kind of put together and think through some of these metrics. And ESJ or EJ Solutions will be facilitating the meeting for this public meeting. So you'll be hearing more about that. But again, it's September 2nd, which is a Thursday from 6 to 8. So I hope members of the CAC can attend, and it'll be open to everyone on the, it's a public meeting. It's not a specific CAC meeting. Third, August is our dark month for EBCE. We will have no CAC meeting in August. So our next regularly scheduled one will be in September. However, what I would like for everybody to do that's on the phone is to think between now and our September meeting about stepping up and becoming chair and vice chair. I want to hold elections in the September meeting, and the new chair and vice chair will begin in October then. So I can say one or two things about what it is to be chair, and Jane can talk about what it is to be vice chair, but you can always feel free to reach out to us directly if you want to talk about, what it takes. I will say I've been chair for 2 years. Jane's been my vice chair during that whole time. And essentially as chair, you also attend the EBCE board meetings. You are a full-on member of that board, except you don't vote. So you can ask questions, you can do anything that a board member can do while you're in the meeting, except vote. You also bring back to the full board in any motions that the CAC passed or any information from the CAC. So that's like a time commitment. So it's a Monday and a Wednesday every month. And then I do some work ahead of time, the week ahead of time, to pull together the agenda. And Jane and I go back and forth on that. And I also provide the CAC annotations after that meeting. And that typically happens within 24 hours of the end of our meeting, sometimes a little bit longer. So that's kind of the time commitment that is absolutely required. As the chair, you can take on anything else that you would like and be as involved in EBCE and bringing the CAC along with you as you so desire. So you have an opportunity to do more if you so choose, which is what Jane and I did with the CAC metrics, or not the CAC, the environmental and social justice metrics effort that is now coming back to the CAC for consideration. Jane, what would you like to add about? And if I'm not here, Jane fills in.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. Vice chair is less of a time commitment. And yeah, I also do note taking during the meeting, and then, help with the annotated notes for Mary after the meeting. She's an extremely organized chair, so it's been pretty easy for me. So, it's a great partnership and a great way to kind of get a little more involved and a little more behind the scenes on EBCE. So definitely recommend the opportunity for those of you who are able.
Great. Thanks. So that's that item. I think I have a couple items about renewable power that I want to share with everyone. First is the good news. EBCE is now paying for power that is generated in the county of Alameda. The Scott Haggerty Wind Energy Center in Livermore, Altamont Pass, began spinning everything up this month in July. It's 57.5 megawatts. It's a wind farm of 23 different turbines, and EBCE is purchasing power from the wind farm for the next 20 years. So that's the good news. Lovely to have that started up. The not so good news that I actually just realized recently is one of the storage projects that it was going to take place has been terminated. PG&E terminated the Oakland Clean Energy Initiative contract for battery storage that was going to help reduce the peaker plant at Jack London Square. So part of that contractual arrangement was EBCE was contingent on having PG&E in the agreement and having that agreement in place and having PG&E be able to get through the CPUC regulatory hurdles. And in April, I think, or May, PG&E terminated the contract. So it was not, I'm sure, I think it was a notice on the EBCE website. That's about the extent of my knowledge. I think that people are not necessarily terribly happy with it, but they'll be looking for other opportunities, I'm sure, as we procure power, as EBCE procures power.
Mary, do you know if that means that the peaker plant will stay online?
I know nothing more about it except for what I shared with you. My guess is it will, because there's no other option.
Yeah.
All right, and then the last thing is over time, EBC board has extended the moratorium on payments, late payments. And so they're extending this payment suspension policy. So people are still able to have their payments suspended through 9/30, so it's September 30th. This is matching PG&E's moratorium, the extension of the payment suspension as well. So those are the items that I wanted to kind of share with the CAC tonight. If there's any questions, you can certainly ask folks, but I'm not sure, especially on some of these, I'm going to be able to add more than what I told you. Ann Olivia.
That was an awesome report, and really, you were not kidding about a broad range of topics. Really exciting about the location of the building being so close to BART and in an environmental justice target community, which is exciting. Super exciting about the wind farm. Really disappointing about the battery storage. I guess this is a question for staff. Is there someone on staff or some sort of opportunity to engage with seeking alternatives to relying on a jet fuel powered plant that we were all really excited to close? Like, what other kind of opportunities are we looking at? And I worked really hard on that one in certain aspects of it, so that's really disappointing. But I guess I'm just wondering, what were the circumstances? Did the CPUC not approve storage as an adequate replacement for resource adequacy, or like what were the circumstances under which that was closed?
Well, one of the things that I'd like to do, Ann Olivia, because Ernie is not here tonight, but he emailed me specifically 3 questions about this. So I'm thinking that it might be best to bring this back as an informational item next meeting in September. I'm sure nothing quick is going to happen, between now and then. And we don't have this on the agenda to really talk through. So.
Sure. That sounds great.
Okay.
All
right. Mickey, you had a question.
Yeah, sorry. I'm wondering, is it appropriate if I send some technology to us, to our group, about maybe a battery technology on a large scale? I just read a lot, so if you were interested, I can certainly, just some foothold, some traction, maybe on an alternative.
Yeah, I think I think that it's perfectly fine to share. What I would suggest you do is send it to Adrian and clerk of the court, clerk of the board, and then he can send it out to the rest of the CAC.
Perfect, thank you.
All right.
One more.
Okay, I don't see your hand, Cynthia. Oh, I'm sorry, it just showed up. Cynthia, yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. I have a question and a comment. How much energy is being generated again at the Scott Haggerty wind farm in the Altamont Pass, please?
So I don't know how much energy, because I know the megawatts, which is the demand, 57.5. It really depends upon how often the wind blows and how hard it blows to determine the actual energy. So they don't really, I'm sure they have an estimated amount of energy, but I don't have that number off the top of my head. I'm not sure if Howard does, but I'm sure what's happening is we're purchasing the energy that is being produced.
We're taking all of the output of that project. It's estimated at about 200,000 megawatt hours a year. But Mary, you're absolutely right. Obviously, it depends on the weather conditions. So there certainly is some variability year to year with wind projects.
Okay. Well, that's a great project. And then I do want to support Anne Olivia's, Ernie, and perhaps other folks on the advisory committee regarding alternative energy, doing something about the peaker plants in downtown Oakland. I know it was a joint project, but I'd like to see if staff can bring something back next month, if there's any way perhaps to partner with someone else or a private group, but if there's any alternatives to diesel in the Jack London Square area, Jack London / West Oakland corridor, which already has a lot of environmental, pollution. Thank you.
Yep, no, I've got it down as a September action item. And so we'll be asking staff to talk to us about that particular one and where they're thinking, what they might have in terms of options in the future. All right, so Nikki and Cynthia, if you have nothing else, can you put your hands down? And then if I see them go down, I'm going to move on. Thank you. All right. Our next item is item C5, and it's an action item for us. I'd like to have us discuss so I can take back to the board on Wednesday kind of what we think about the power resources RFO contract that I believe Howard's going to talk to us about.
Yes, indeed. I will apologize in advance. You're stuck with me presenting the next 3 staff items. So I'll try to keep it lively and stay on point. A couple of the items are pretty dense and lengthy agenda items for Wednesday. And I can go to any level of depth you would like, but I know Mary had certainly suggested let's keep things relatively high level with a number of new CAC members and make sure I'm covering the sort of main points. And I'll let you guys guide me if you want to go deeper, of course. This first item is on our RPS and storage resource RFO. Marie Fontenot, our Senior Director of Power Resources, is going to actually present this on Wednesday, but she had a conflict tonight, so I'm standing in for her. So if we want to jump to the next slide, Adrian. This is an action item for the board on Wednesday. We are seeking approval for our CEO to negotiate and execute 4 contracts. The 4 contracts are laid out here. They're actually 4 slightly different contracts. One is a renewable RPS, renewable portfolio standard power purchase agreement. That is a 10-year, 100 megawatt wind project based in New Mexico. This would be our first out of state renewable project. And it's with Pattern Energy with an expected COD. Oop, sorry, there was a little hiccup on my end. With an expected COD in December of 2021. The second contract there is an energy storage agreement. So it's a standalone battery storage project. That is a 12-year, 47 megawatt times 4-hour duration. So 188 megawatt hour battery storage project in Kern County. That is with TerraGen, who we've previously contracted with as well. And that's expected to be operational in June of 2022. Third project is an RPS PPA plus ESA, so it's a solar plus storage project. It's a 15-year, 50 megawatt solar project with a 12.5 megawatt storage project. Again, 4-hour duration, so times 4 would be 50 megawatt hours. That's in San Bernardino County with Clearway Energy as the developer. We've also contracted with them in the past. That's expected to be operational in March of 2023. And then the last project listed here is an solar plus storage project where we're contracting indexed RPS and resource adequacy. And it's a 15-year, 125 megawatt solar with 125 megawatt RA from the battery associated with this project. So 125 megawatts of battery there as well. That's with Intersect Power, projects in Riverside County, and that's expected to be operational in December of 2023. So 4 different projects. You can see the dates are somewhat staggered between 2021 through 2023. And we've tried to diversify as much as we can with wind, standalone storage, solar plus storage, and then a solar plus storage, but it's an index deal. So that is what we're bringing forward to the board. That's the summary. If you want to go to the next
Sorry,
slide.
Howard.
Yep.
Could you clarify what indexed means?
Yeah, so typically, I shouldn't say typically, oftentimes when we'll do a PPA contract that is a fixed price contract. So if you're contracted with a solar plus storage project, you buy, you use it as an energy hedge, and you get the renewable attribute, the PCC1 rec. You can alternatively take an approach where you index the deal, so it doesn't serve as an energy hedge, but provides you a PCC1 rec. And so it's the reason to do that is to, at least our reason to do that was to diversify some of our contracts. We have a lot of fixed price solar and solar plus storage contracts. And so with this particular project with Intersect, we said, let's approach this a little differently. And we're still buying the energy, just as it's a bundled PCC1, just to be clear, it's, just as we would any other PCC1, but we're indexing the energy to CAISO market prices. So it doesn't provide the same level of hedge, which, on the one hand, a hedge is something that we want to procure. On the other hand, if you procure a lot of hedges from solar and storage, you have a lot of concentration in one particular technology. So that's the reason to change up the contract structure.
Thank you.
Adrian, yeah, great, thanks. The next few slides have been presented before to the board when we brought forward 2 other standalone storage projects in the June board meeting. And I think they were presented to the CAC as well, though I can't recall if they were, but this is just some background on the RFO itself. The goals and objectives will really look at securing a portfolio of contracts to provide our customers with affordable, renewable, and clean energy sources. We were trying to address certain needs related to SB 350 long-term contracting requirements. We were meeting IRP near and midterm resource adequacy reliability procurement mandates. So there's now 2 separate CPUC orders related to procuring new incremental resource adequacy. So that's what that's referring to. We're of course trying to create new renewable energy projects to deliver PCC1 RECs, and of course, look to manage our risk within our portfolio, procure low-cost energy, and various hedges to manage that risk. We looked at project characteristics in terms of location, construction status, the capacity kind of range that we targeted was minimum size of 10 megawatts, maximum size of 200 megawatts. delivery dates starting as early as 2021 and going out into 2024. We solicited 5 to 20-year duration contracts and looked at a mix of renewable storage, large hydro, so broadly across sort of clean energy resources. It was a broad open solicitation issued in 2020. We evaluated a combination of different projects across the portfolio of what we received. And sort of lastly there, we encouraged RFO participants to actually be pretty creative and try to propose shaped offers, with storage, without storage, different storage sizing, things like that. Next slide, Adrian. The participation in the RFO is pretty strong. We had over 70 unique project sites, over 400 contract variations. All 6 projects that we solicited were offered, and that was across solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, and standalone storage. And projects were based in 6 different states, though predominantly California, of course. Next slide, Adrian. So a little bit about the evaluation process. There was 3 main categories that we evaluated in our scoring rubric. One is counterparty execution, offer competitiveness, and then project development status. And we had multiple items under each of these areas. Counterparty execution really looked at the experience of the developer, both in terms of where they have developed projects, where they own projects, size of projects, location projects, etc. Offer competitiveness was mostly focused on pricing, but also looked at term sheet markups, looked at project location, type of labor that they utilize, and then project development status looked at the maturity of the project itself. Did it have site control secured? Where was it at in terms of the interconnection status? Where were they at in terms of permitting? Or even in terms of starting construction already in some select cases. We had 2 reviewers to each project, so had some redundancy there to put multiple eyes on each project proposal. Staff reviewed all submitted information, provided scores for all categories, except term sheet markups and MPV, which was done on a separate evaluation basis. So each item, so the term sheet markups are scored by one assigned reviewer. And then the NPV scores were done through a modeling exercise that we created. There's a little bit of a summary of what we did without going into too many details. When you do project valuations, you're trying to project out 10, 15, 20 years. No load serving entity, of course, has a magic crystal ball to determine what prices will be in the future, but our approach is to obviously take certain assumptions and we look at different forward pricing curves. And then we do some simulated runs across those different pricing curves. And those pricing curves are intended to sort of have a base case and then stress test them in different ways. So looking at if there was very significant battery storage penetration and solar penetration, or alternatively having some reason that there was less than predicted storage and solar penetration. So we looked at different factors like that to sort of stress test the different forward curves. And then we did simulated runs to look at sort of your P5, P50, P95 results. And then we do a weighting across those 3 different results per each curve. And then we do a simple average there. And we come up with an NPV per megawatt number that is comparable across all of our projects. So we can truly look at the sort of economic impact of having that project as part of our portfolio. And then lastly, just note that the scoring rubric approach that we took here was a consistent methodology with what we did in the prior RFP that we did in 2018. So we tried to, despite some modest adjustments, very consistent. Next slide, Adrian. So those slides were just a little bit about the process itself. The next few slides, there's 2 slides apiece on each of the 4 projects. So that details the project itself, and then a little bit about the developer as well. The first project I mentioned was the Pattern project. And this is a 100 megawatt wind project based in Torrance and Guadalupe counties in New Mexico. I guess slight correction on that wording. Our contract is for 100 megawatt wind PPA. The total project build out from what we're procuring from is 272 megawatts, but even that is a subset of a much larger wind build out in New Mexico, which is about a gigawatt. So this is one of the largest wind projects in sort of the Western region. So this is a portion of that. It's a 10-year contract. It's expected to COD in December of 2021. So we're just a few years off. That project is in construction already, as you would expect, given that expected COD date. It has an executed interconnection agreement and site control, of course, as a result of that. Any project that we have that is out of county, we generally seek some contributions to a community investment fund so that we can invest in a variety of energy programs in our service territory. And so for all of these projects, they have committed to contribute to a community investment fund. So Pattern has done that. They are utilizing a mix of union and non-union labor, to be clear on this project. You would imagine in this area of New Mexico, there is very limited labor in such a remote area for such a large project build out. So it is a mix of union and non-union, but they are using prevailing wages for the most part. That is something I wanted to call out here. For any California-based project, we always do all union labor, or primarily union labor, I should say, and generally have the developers all signing multi-party project labor agreements. Last bullet here is the contract entity we have here is called Tecolote Wind LLC. All of these projects are always done under project level LLCs. So that's who you always directly contract with. Next slide, Adrian. Oh, no, sorry, jumped ahead one too many. So just a little bit about Pattern itself, the developer, one of the world's largest privately owned developers and operators of wind, solar, and transmission. They were founded in 2009. They have an operational portfolio that includes 28 renewable energy facilities, operating capacity of 4.4 gigawatts in the United States, Canada, and Japan. And actually, they have quite a significant office in San Francisco, so partially Bay Area based. And they do have a track record in California and some experience with CCA specifically. So, in this particular project, they have signed with Silicon Valley Community Energy and Triple CE. So part of the same broader build out that we're contracting as well. And as you can see here, just a couple other examples of some California entities they have signed with, such as SMUD, PG&E, and SDG&E. So fairly experienced in the California sort of load serving entity market. Next slide, Adrian. The next project is a project with TerraGen. This is a 47 megawatt, 4-hour duration, so 188 megawatt hour standalone storage project in Kern County. It's a 12-year contract. This is a full toll arrangement, meaning we're taking the resource adequacy capacity and we have full control rights over the battery. So, we will charge and discharge that for energy arbitrage as well as ancillary services. It's expected to be operational in June of 2022. One of the unique things about this project is there is some risk of a delay in interconnection. And so what we have negotiated with them that if that is delayed, then they would backfill that RA to the June 2022 COD timeframe. That would allow us to satisfy some incremental RA requirements that we have. This one has an executed interconnection agreement, site control, it's fully permitted. They are investing in our community investment fund. They have executed a project labor agreement utilizing union labor. And the contract entity here is Edward Sanborn Storage 3 LLC. Next slide, Adrian. A bit about this developer. Again, this is a very experienced developer. They're an independent power producer. They've developed wind, solar, geothermal storage. They have about 1,300 megawatts in operations and about 3+ gigawatts in development. They were established in 2007, and then they were acquired by a larger private equity firm called Energy Capital Partners in September of 2015. And TerraGen is comprised of a development business, operation O&M platform, and again, they have about a gigawatt of operating portfolio. They've worked with other CCAs as well. We have a contract with them, as I noted earlier. It's a project called Edward Solar 2, actually in that same general area. It's a 100 megawatt solar. It's called the Solar and Virtual Storage Project. It's really a solar output that we're purchasing, but we have certain parameters in that have negotiated that which is why we call it a virtual storage project. And then, they have contracted with MCE, CPA, Clean Power SF, San Jose Pioneer. So they have quite a bit of experience working specifically with CCAs. Next slide, Adrian. Next project, this is the 50 megawatt solar project with 12.5 megawatts of battery storage, totaling 50 megawatt hours of battery storage. This is with Clearway. This is part of an advanced stage Daggett facility, which is 482 megawatts. So this is a portion of a larger build out located in San Bernardino County. And portions of the project are scheduled to come online in 2022. The portion we're talking about here is scheduled for March of 2023, and it's a 15-year contract term that we're pursuing. They have an executed interconnection agreement, site control, fully permitted. General theme that you'll tell here is most of these projects are pretty well developed and mature. They're investing in our community investment fund. They have signed a letter of intent to execute a 5-trade PLA. That is what they did on their other project that is actually operational with us, which is called Rosamond. And so, they generally use union labor for their projects. And lastly, the contracting entity here is Daggett South Power 3 LLC. Next slide, Adrian. Clearway Energy Group, they're a well-capitalized, privately owned company. They're actually a spin-out of NRG's Renewable Development Division. Just as background, they have corporate offices in San Francisco and Carlsbad, and about 150 employees based in California. And actually quite a number of them are in the East Bay Area. They have over a decade of experience in developing, financing, and operating renewable energy projects, own and operate a portfolio of about 5 gigawatts of renewable assets across 26 states, and a pipeline of over 10 gigawatts currently under development. As I already noted, we have a project called Rosamond that is already online with them. It's a 112 megawatt solar project. And they also have a contract with CPA, so they have some CCA experience outside of us. Next slide, Adrian. This is the fourth project. I know I'm rattling off a lot of details, but this is the fourth one. This is a 125 megawatt solar project. I believe that's actually a typo. Apologies for that. It's a 125 megawatt battery storage, not 125, not 100 megawatt battery storage. And this is part of a larger project build out that is 500 megawatts. That is PV plus storage with multiple off-takers. As I noted, this is an index contract. It's a 15-year contract for the PCC1 REX, and it's a 10-year contract for the resource adequacy. Expected to be operational December of 2023. And it has full capacity deliverability in April of 2021, which means that it has secured resource adequacy. And the project is a total of 6,300 acres under site control, with 3,500 being used for solar and battery installations. The contract entity here is called IP Oberon 2 LLC. Next slide, Adrian. Intersect Power is a clean infrastructure company bringing efficient, innovative, and scalable low carbon solutions to its customers in energy commodity markets. They are a joint venture between Intersect Power and SoftBank Energy, which creates Intersect Power Renewable Energy Holdings. They've developed, permitted, and contracted about 1.7 gigawatts of projects, and 250 megawatts of which are in California and Texas. They're in the Greater Bay Area with a number of their employees actually in Alameda County. And we have actually an in-service territory project. It's an RA-only contract that's with Aramis Project. If you recall, that's a project that was been actively discussed in our prior board meetings. This is an RA-only contract, and actually the other CCA, which is not listed here, is Clean Power SF. So they do have experience contracting with another CCA as well. And you can see a few of the other load-serving entities that they work with, such as Austin Energy, Direct Energy, Lower Colorado River Authority. So that is the last of the 4 projects. There's a few additional slides here. If you can go to the next slide. This is just sort of a picture to show you where the projects are located. 3 of the projects are in state in Southern California. So you can see the 2 orange icons there are the 2 solar plus storage projects. The blue one is the standalone storage project, the 47 megawatt battery. And then the purple one is the 100 megawatt wind project based in New Mexico. We did bring forth a couple projects in June as a reminder. So these are 4 additional projects to that. Next slide, Adrian. And then this is just a summary of some of the already contracted projects we had from our prior RFP. The first 2 are now operational. So the Clearway Energy Group project is the Rosemount project that I mentioned. That's the first project that we had come online in December of 2020. The Salka Energy Group project, that is the Alameda County project that Mary touched on earlier tonight. And that one just came online a couple weeks ago. And then we have 4 additional projects that are yet to come online. One is with Idemitsu Solar in Tulare County, coming online end of this year. And then 3 additional projects that are coming online end of 2022, which are larger projects, 100 to 125 megawatt projects, all solar plus storage. One is the one with solar plus virtual storage. And then last slide, just to touch on next steps. We're gonna complete the negotiations that we've brought forth tonight, and execute those contracts. We'll provide an information update to the board, of course, in the coming months once we have completed all of that to confirm what was finally executed. And then we'll track milestones just as we do with any other PPA that we signed, as there are a number of development and construction related milestones to keep track of to make sure projects are on track to come online. And the last 2 bullets here are just sort of touching on some informational reporting requirements that we have to the CPUC as it relates to bringing on new renewables and then resource adequacy specifically. So, we're always in pretty active engagement with them to highlight the projects we have under development and contracting. And that is this presentation. I will pause for questions.
Great, thank you, Howard. I'm going to open it up to the public, and I see Vaughn has had his hand up, and then I'm going to bring it back to the CAC. So raise your hands and we can ask questions at that point. You're on mute, Adrian.
Yes, I'm going to recognize Vaughn for 3 minutes.
Good evening. These are kind of maybe wonkish questions, but for Howard, is the cost of the power plus the transmission so much cheaper when you're doing it from the ground, as opposed to doing it from rooftops, that you can go out 400 miles or 300 miles and it's still that much cheaper? Is that also, is that part of the consideration that you make in your scoring, or is that part of the consideration that the sellers of the power are making when they offer the information? My third question has to do with transmission. Are you competing with PG&E as one of the entities that's buying power? And also, the problems with power in the Bay Area is not necessarily the amount of power; it's the transmission that gets shut off to certain districts. Is any of that play into this kind of thing?
So Vaughn, I'm going to answer a little bit here, but I'm not sure that the questions are going to, that Howard can get into a lot of that because it's a little bit beyond this power contract. But I'm going to say a few things. Howard, you let me know if I'm on point or off. The presentation was specific to a choice that EBC had made in terms of procuring power from large amounts of power. So looking at whether or not the other option of distributed energy resources and from behind the meter solar is a different question. And so this is all about the choice had been made to look at it this way. I think that, Vaughn, you do bring up an interesting point as whether or not this is cheaper than if you're going behind the meter, but that's not what this discussion is about. And the transmission aspect of it is, I'm going to make I'm going to say something, Howard, you'd like say right or wrong. I mean, it's assumed that transmission will occur, whether or not one is not forecasting the potential for power saving, public safety power shutoffs due to transmissions going down or other components. But Howard, do I have that right, or is that?
I think both points are correct on the latter point. You know, I mean, we have interconnection details to confirm, you know, transmission rights on the projects themselves. We do look at some studies related to congestion, but you know, in terms of explicit forecasting of power, you know, PSPS events, that is something that would be extremely challenging to do. So it's not directly taken into account for, you know, specific project locations here.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is EBCE is a load serving entity, LSE, and they are competing for power with all other LSEs in the state of California, of which PG&E is one. So yeah, and every LSE has to have a certain % of resource adequacy in their portfolio. And so when Howard talks about RA, resource adequacy, that is covering the required amount that as a load serving entity, EBCE must have to follow the regulatory requirements that the public utility puts in place. I'm seeing. Okay.
Well said. Yes, well said.
Thank you, Howard. So, Vaughn, I appreciate your comments, and I think that it is something that as a CAC also for the next chair and whomever to think about whether or not these are questions that as a CAC we want to start talking about, you know, and asking staff to help support a good conversation on costs behind the meter versus the cost of what we're doing in advance. Howard, I know I have a couple questions for you about this presentation, but I'm going to go to our the members first. And so Joel, I'd like to ask, have you ask your questions, and then Shiva, and then Anna Olivia.
Sure. I have a couple of questions. So I see that we selected the 4 sites, and they are 3 in California, 1 in New Mexico. So my first question is, how the geographical location affects the final pricing? Like, it's located in California, we will pay less, or maybe located in far away, we end up paying less. And also, when we purchase the power, are we paying any transmission cost? I know we pay PG&E, but like the New Mexico side is outside of PG&E territory. Are we paying cost for that? So these 2 questions.
Sure. So on the cost side of things, for this particular New Mexico wind project, it actually delivers into CAISO. So the seller is bearing all associated transmission costs to bring it into CAISO. That is not always the case, and then we would be under the responsibility to then pay for transmission costs and taking the risk that we'd be able to procure the transmission rights to be able to deliver it in state. But in general, our RFP and all out-of-state resources that we consider contracting have to deliver into CAISO so that we de-risk that aspect that you're referring to. So for this particular contract, we don't have any incremental transmission-related costs in order to get it into the CAISO grid. With that said, all of our, well, I shouldn't say all, most of our contracts are P-node settled. Now, and this can get a little bit wonky. Every project injection point in CAISO is a P-node. So there are, I don't even know the exact number, there are hundreds, if not thousands of P-nodes across CAISO. you look up the ISO map, you can actually get different price points. You'll see these little bubbles throughout the state of California. And most long-term PPAs for renewable generation projects are P-node settled, which means you buy and sell at that particular P-node. That may or may not be a very effective hedge for what we're paying for our power. So there is basis risk there between what we pay, which is PG&E DLAP. DLAP stands for Default Load Aggregation Point. There's an aggregation of multiple P nodes that make up the PG&E service territory. And that's what all CCAs pay, ourselves included. And so there is basis risk between our PG&E DLAP and the P node from all of these project delivery points. And that basis risk and that P node price takes into account components such as congestion and things like that. So as a general matter, P node projects will have a lower price than a PG&E DLAP project. We will generally have to pay a higher price for what we buy. So that's.
But can you clarify, Howard, that the P node includes transmission costs or not?
That's right. It absolutely includes transmission costs and is part of the CAISO grid. So it is when we buy energy and sell energy, it is an effective hedge and a participant in the CAISO market. So we're not paying any additional transmission costs, but what is baked into that basis risk is associated with congestion of whether the energy is being produced in a location where the energy is needed. And that is, I think, sort of speaks a little bit to congestion, but technically it is included in because it's delivered into CAISO as is. Does that make sense? I know that was a little bit of a complicated topic right there.
Yes.
Okay, Joel, any other questions before we move on to Shiva?
No, thanks.
Thank you. Shiva? And then Olivia, and then Cynthia.
Yes, I think I like the portfolio of projects which you have brought in front of us. Looks good to me. I just have a few questions, quite a few questions. I'll start with 2 or 3 for my first round if need be. So what is the community investment fund and how do you evaluate a proposal where they are contributing to the community investment fund or not? It seems like all the projects are not contributing to that fund. The second is on the price forecast. Are you looking at hourly prices or what's the granularity of prices are you looking at? Those are my first 2 questions.
Sure. First, on the community investment fund, for some of the terms are negotiated counterparty to counterparty as to how those funds can be utilized. So in some cases, we need to get approval rights from the counterparty. But in general, the terms allow us quite a bit of flexibility to put those towards various community development projects within territory, energy related, labor development related, and such. A couple examples of how we've actually utilized those funds during this past year with COVID. We worked with 2 different developers, Clearway Energy, one of the projects that we presented tonight, as well as EDPR, who had previously committed to community investment funds. And we put, I don't remember the dollar off the top of my head, but it was approximately $200,000 a piece towards community investment grants. So, that is just one example where, we saw a specific need. We reached out to the counterparty and asked if we could actually accelerate the contributions from those community investment funds and put them towards COVID-related relief efforts. And they agreed. And so we were able to, I think we donated a mix to sort of the Alameda County Food Bank, a couple other organizations, and then opened some up for the smaller dollar specific community investment grants, community related grants that we had put out there. So going forward, I think it will be somewhat need-based, but we have general flexibility, and those are things that we would certainly take to the board, take to the CAC, and get additional ideas for how we actually deploy those funds.
So is it a lump sum dollar amount or is it per megawatt hour based ongoing contribution?
It's a completely commercially negotiated level and contribution amount. So it's not a dollar level that we end up disclosing directly since they are confidential terms, but it will. When we can, once we have these executed, we'll share more details in terms of at least lump sum and general time frame that those are available.
Okay. And my second question is the price forecast. When you
Yeah, so price forecast is on an hourly basis. We do a price forecast on SP15 and NP15, and then we do some analysis to determine basis risk, P node basis risk that I discussed earlier. Obviously, it's very difficult to accurately predict or forecast P node pricing, but we do we do look at historical basis risk for P nodes relative to the hub settle pricing, and we do try to forecast that out to incorporate that level of risk into the analysis.
very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna Olivia and then Cynthia.
Howard, your presentations are always just brilliant, frankly. It makes sense that you're doing this diversification and getting different kinds of, solar and storage and solar plus storage, and when that's great. The longer term duration as part of compliance with SB 350 makes sense too. I guess I'm going to break this into 3 little chunks, and one of them I'll just start with transportation because there seems to be, or transmission because it seems to be a theme that's coming up. And just as a side note, there's just under 10,000 P nodes in the state of California. Last time I had to do a report. It's pretty fascinating. It's like 35,000 transactions a day or something wild. And oh, sorry, that number's higher. But so the slide 14 had the location of the projects, and all the things that we're looking at are current San Bernardino, Riverside, and New Mexico. Is that correct?
The 4 projects that we presented this evening, yes.
Right. And then it looks like the majority of other projects that were on that map, at least the part that I could see, also seem to be kind of based in that same general area. So I am wondering what kind of risk management we're doing around transmission issues, as we know those things do come up, and whether or not you got responses from within Alameda County as part of this solicitation process.
Adrian, if you want to actually pull up that slide 14, maybe that would be helpful reference.
That would be helpful because I didn't get to see it for very long.
So you can see the gray icons there are all projects that we have under contract. There are a little cluster right under that blue lightning bolt there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can see, obviously north of there, you can see a number of other, gray icons. So there are certainly some in the Bay Area, and then, some in Central California, and then yes, a clustering in Southern California. So, it's reasonably diverse, but yes, there is more concentration in Southern California. There's more concentration in solar, given limited wind build out and wind resources in California, unfortunately, which is really one of the reasons why we even have a New Mexico wind project, of course. And so, given heavy concentration in solar, inevitably there's a heavier concentration in Southern California, which has much stronger solar radiation resources relative to Northern California. We certainly considered projects in Central and Northern California. Order of magnitude wise, the large proportion of projects that we received were in Southern California. There's just, significant more development and build out there, easier permitting regimes, stronger, solar resources that make sense. But yes, what that creates is, there's been a lot of discussion on transmission risk. I would really point to P node pricing basis risk as a reflection of that. And that's something that we incorporate, but again, very difficult to predict and forecast exactly where they come out. But we do try to account for specific congestion risk for projects that are located, in more geographically remote areas, to account for that. So I guess my point being, there is some P node related basis risk there, but you would expect there to be significantly lower solar PPA pricing to sort of account for that and address that risk. And that's what we've done. Your second question, do did we receive other Alameda County projects? I'd rather not speak to that. We're in active negotiations still. So I think following completion of this RFO, perhaps can touch on that a little bit more as we bring forward additional projects for approval and such, if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so transitioning a little bit into labor, I am curious also what kind of prevailing wage compliance documentation you're requesting, or just are you requesting it? I don't need to know what kind it is for the projects that are not operating under PLAs. And if you know what percentage of labor is covered under the PLAs during construction in California, and if after they move out of construction and into operation, whether or not those facilities will be either operating under union contract or open to like a card check agreement or something like that.
A what agreement you said?
Do they have pro-labor language? Or are you familiar with whether or not there is pro-labor language included in our agreements, as we have done in the past, like we did with the call center and some of the other contracts they were executing earlier, whether or not that kind of language is also being incorporated into our PPAs for the ongoing operation, for the workers who are performing the ongoing operation at these sites?
I don't know specifically what we would define, if there's sort of more formal definition of pro-labor language, but generally, yes, there is. These are pro-union labor contracts where they generally sign 5-party PLA agreements, so at least all the in-state projects, and I believe it does include operations of the projects. Though, as you are probably already aware, there are very limited actual operational jobs associated with solar projects in practice, but I think it does cover that. I don't know if it covers it to what you're speaking to in terms of pro-labor language, if there's something specific there, or if you're just saying generally are they agreeing to contract union labor.
It's mostly card check neutrality moving forward into operations, but your answer was I mean, it mostly covered it, so that's good. And are y'all looking for prevailing wage compliance from the New Mexico project? Do you have some kind of third-party monitor or something like that?
We don't have a third-party monitor there. They have reps and warranties that they've provided in the contract. They've given us details on it. The unfortunate reality is that project's already under construction, and so there was very little influence we could have in terms of changing language, since all their labor agreements are already negotiated, the project's partially built. With that said, they disclosed to us what they've been doing, and we felt generally comfortable with that, especially given some of the other off-takers that they are selling to that are in California. But unfortunately, it was pretty limited what we could sort of influence in that circumstance.
Thank you so much for those answers. I know you can't really comment on the Community Investment Fund yet. When you do go to bring that back to us, I would be interested in hearing, even in aggregate or cumulative, so you're not in violation of any specifics, what percentage of the contract amount they're contributing to the Community Investment Fund? Because it seems like that I would be really interested in seeing the relationship of those numbers. So thank you again. That was a lot of dense information, and it answered my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna Olivia. Cynthia, and then Mickey.
Yes, Howard, first of all, I wanted to say I'm very pleased with our renewable energy contracts and the board's commitment to renewable energy, wind, solar, battery storage. I think renewable energy is where we need to go. And I am pleased that at least most of the California contracts do include labor agreements. I do want to ask about the Arizona contract. I realize some of this may be confidential because of the contracting process, but I'm curious. And you did say that Arizona perhaps
Mexico.
generates.
It's in New Mexico. It's a contract in New Mexico, Cynthia.
I'm sorry, I meant to say New Mexico. Thank you for the thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
The New Mexico contract, I understand that there may be more wind generated in New Mexico, but did we look at any California contracts? And I don't know if you can speak to how competitive they were. Overall, what I saw tonight, most of our contracts are in California. Of course, we do want to have more contracts within Alameda County, has part of the local business development plan. But can you speak to, in general, why the Arizona, New Mexico was chosen?
Sure. Maybe I can speak in some generalities so we don't get into any sensitive kind of proposal information. The solicitation was definitely broadly open to all renewable energy technologies, California and outside of California, which is different from our initial RFP, which was California, restricted just to California. So we did open this one up a little bit more broadly to the Western region. And we did get proposals across all those technologies, as I think was earlier noted in the presentation. But as a general, I guess, characteristic that I'll share is just there's a lot more solar development in California at this stage than there is wind development. There is far more limited wind resources and availability of land and such for good, well-priced, competitive priced wind projects, unfortunately. So we looked at that. We considered it, looking at a combination of, in-state pricing, location. The New Mexico wind project made a lot of sense. Two other factors I'll just highlight. One is the time of the operational date is really important. And so this project is our earliest date that we have coming online of the projects that we've negotiated. So that's an important consideration. And then two is, it's certainly not as simple as saying, is there another wind project and what is the price of that PPA? A lot of that depends on when is the project actually generating. So when is the wind blowing? And so one of the important factors to take into account here as to when we consider resources outside of California are when is the sunshine and when is the wind blow? And out-of-state solar projects don't have that much variation, as you would imagine. Sun still shines during the day, but wind projects have quite a bit of variation. So New Mexico-based wind has quite a different generation profile than California-based wind. And it's quite different between Southern California wind and Alameda County wind, actually. So those are really important factors that really complicate the valuation process because I think it was Shiva's point earlier, our price forecast is done on an hourly basis. And so we look at, our project proposals on an hourly basis and over, 10, 15, 20-year durations. And we're also looking at that basis risk. So there's quite a number of factors that are important to sort of do evaluation of project to say that is a competitive project. But the short answer is yes, we certainly considered in-state projects for wind as well. But there are some uniquenesses with this particular project and its generation profile, its online date that we felt like were important.
Thank you. That really answers some of the questions that I had, and there's more factors to consider than what may meet the eye. So thank you.
Great. Okay, so we're gonna have Mickey, and then I have one particular question, and then I'm gonna ask for a motion because this is one for us and keep us moving in our meeting. Mickey?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, the last question, and this has been a great presentation. It's educational, and it was just actually almost the same thing that the answer he gave kind of addresses. So I understand that it's desirable to diversify where this power comes from, but and then my question was, what is the most desirable and has the highest value and price per mega or terawatt, as far as solar, wind, hydro, all of those. And I think the answer was given, and it's complicated. And so I just wanted to thank you for that. And I'm going to lower my hand now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mickey. First of all, I support the projects that are being put forward to the CAC for us tonight and the board on Wednesday. I feel like they really are a nice mix of projects, given all the things you've told us, Howard. And it's nice to hear that these are the people that you're going to be contracting with are very experienced. So it's moving forward. These things are going to happen, and the contracts will be put in place. So I'm supporting this. My question for you is related to this, but not quite. And these 4 projects are going to be built out by, I think, the end of 2023 was one of them. And then you have multiple other projects that are going to be built up by the end of 2022. Can you give a sense, high level, in terms of how much now EBCE, once these are all in place, will have under contract for the power that we're purchasing? This is more of the IRP, but I guess for the CAC also to think like we have a bucket that's 100%. Some we buy on the market and some we're purchasing. And as we gain more of these contracts, we're going to have more certainty in terms of what the costs of the energy are. And so do you have a sense how much of that is going to be filled by these 4 and any of the others that are currently under contract, assuming that the board okays these 4?
Yeah, so I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but sort of doing some ballpark sort of back in the envelope math. It is, I think it is a little over 1/3 of the energy that would be under long-term contracts that we have signed. So between these projects signed and then what we've previously signed, it's about it's a little over 1/3. I would guess it's probably close to 40%. Now, bear in mind, I'm not counting any of the standalone storage projects when I sort of point to that number, because those would be grid charged projects that don't actually contribute to our load, but serve as hedging instruments and resource adequacy.
No, but I guess for me, what it also says is you guys are going to continue to go out and procure energy, because I think that you want more than that for 40% in our kind of thing. But we're only 3 years old. And
that's
pretty
absolutely right.
good to be having that.
We are not done with this one.
Yeah.
We will continue to put out another RFO. I think tentatively it may be an every other year type process. You put it out and it takes you about a year, quite frankly, to negotiate everything, evaluate it, and then you put another one out a year later. So.
Okay, thank you for that. So Shiva, you have one more, and Anna Olivia, and then I'm going to ask you guys for a motion from somebody. Shiva.
Yes, I have one question. Are there more projects coming from the same RFO for approval, or are we done with these 4 projects? Are the RFO is the RFO going to close?
We don't necessarily formally close the process, but we are still in some discussions from this RFO.
For additional projects, potentially.
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anna Olivia?
Are you good with that?
You cut out. We didn't hear anything.
Oh, I said I had raised my hand to make a motion.
Great. What's your motion?
I would like to move that the CAC recommendation to the board is to approve staff's request with asking our chair to summarize the concerns and note specifically the multiple directions that transmission concerns came from, and hoping to see something in the future that adds weight or favorability to Alameda, additional weight or favorability to Alameda-based projects, or something like that. Like, just there's some concern around the number of projects that are coming externally, and we would love to encourage more Alameda County development. I think that's a neutral statement, if that makes sense.
And I'll second it, Cynthia Landry.
Okay. So for those that are slightly that are newer on the CAC, what Anna Olivia has really put forward is the motion is that we support the projects as put forward, and then what she's talking about is I add color to it as the chair. I also add a little bit more in terms of what I heard from the CAC and information about it. And that's what she's talking about, is to make sure that I bring back to the board some of the concerns about the transmission questions that we heard, and also the desire to have additional weight for Alameda County local projects in the future. So those don't have to be part of the official motion language, but I do bring that forward when I talk to the board. And so we have I have a motion and a second. Do we have any further conversation?
I guess just one clarification. Do we know for sure that, I mean, I didn't see here presented qualification criteria that would have included or not included Alameda County as a consideration. So maybe Howard, if you could just clarify on that point.
I'm sorry, what's your question really? Whether we accounted for weighting towards Alameda County and RFO?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, we absolutely did. Yes. So Alameda County, we actually had in multiple categories. We had based on their staff and organizations headquarters where they are based. We had it where the project is based, and then specifically we have a separate category that is somewhat redundant in my opinion, but we felt it was important, is are they utilizing Alameda County labor? So, you know, you could have a project technically based in Alameda County, but not have Alameda County labor. So you would get some points, but certainly not all. So in some ways you have some redundancy of those,
which is
kind of benefits.
Which is why I changed the language to would like to see more in the future, because I think it's neutral and doesn't assume weighting or even suggest changing necessarily the weighting, but that we would like to see more local projects in the future.
Any other comments? All right, Adrian, can you please take a roll call vote?
Yes. Member Eldridge.
Yes.
Member Landry.
Yes.
Member Liu.
Yes.
Member Swaminathan.
Yes.
Member Lachman.
Yes.
Member Talria.
Yes.
Member Pacheco. Oh, excuse me. Member Souza.
Yes.
Member Ratia. Member Ratia.
You hear me?
Now we can.
Yes.
Okay. My audio is going a little crazy.
Yes, thank you.
Did you say yes or no? We didn't hear that. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Got it.
Vice Chair Frank.
Yes.
Chair Sutter.
Yes.
Pass unanimously.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, Jindo.
All right. So thanks all for that discussion. We'll see if we can make up some time on our next couple to get out of here in 40 minutes. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so Howard, the next item is about the treasurer's report. And I have to apologize a little bit to folks on the CAC. I was thinking this was more the financials. So this is a consent item for the board. They're not going to be bringing this forward. This is just kind of an FYI. It's an informational item for us, but it is one of the things that as the CAC moves forward as CAC members, you know, you're going to be seeing these. So this is just to get your first touch at what is occurring in the treasurer's report. Howard.
I can certainly cover this very quickly, I think, and happy to obviously take additional questions if there are any. But to your request, Mary, I think, you know, it would make sense to cover the financial statements at another meeting. So happy to go through that. This is what is provided on a quarterly basis and really just shows a summary of our cash balances, our funds received in our lockbox, where if we have any outstanding loan balances, and then any aging that we have. So it is a very, very limited snapshot of certain financial metrics, but it is a by policy, it is required that we issue this, and so that's why we do this every quarter. Much more substantive information in the actual financial statements that we have. So just to touch on this then real quick, the first section is our account balances. So these are all of our various bank accounts, and it totals $155 million, so quite a healthy level. This doesn't directly tie at some point when we talk about our actual balance sheet. It doesn't directly tie there because this includes some restricted funds, non-restricted funds, things like that. This is literally just a snapshot of what is in our bank account statements. And then the next table is what's received into our lockbox, broken out by month. And so without spending too much time on this, we have a lockbox mechanism that basically is a controlled account. So any funds that are received by customers first flow into a lockbox. And then the lockbox then gets dispersed to a certain number of energy suppliers first, who have some seniority there. And then they are transferred into our discretionary funds, so into our operating fund. So what you see under the lockbox above is controlled. We can't just take that money and spend that. We have to go pay off energy suppliers first. And we put that in place as a new startup public agency because you have to do that sort of early on before you have the working capital to really support operating your business. So for that, we got extended payment terms with energy suppliers basically for that security. The next, if you can go to the next page, Adrian, the first thing there is outstanding loan balance. It's 0, so not a very exciting number, but that makes me happy. So we do not have any debt outstanding beyond the initial debt that we took on from Alameda County, and a little bit of initial debt that we pulled from Barclays, which we paid in the first year of operations. We have not drawn any debt, so that's 0. And then the last section is customer delinquency. So these are our aging numbers. You can see the different categories there. So 30 to 60 days is a little over $2 million. Really 30, 60, 60, 90, and 90 to 120 are all around the $2 million level. And then the 120 plus days is close to $17 million, quite a larger number. This is the subject of a lot of discussion that we have related to our arrearage management plan and how we want to work with those customers to facilitate some payments and some debt forgiveness through that participation. So, but this is just general aging, so it doesn't really break down any of that beyond beyond these buckets. And that's it.
So 2 questions. Can you go back to the first page? And can you explain to the group why the cash received by month into the lockbox account is 79 million and the account balance up top lockbox shows 10?
That is just, the 10 is as of June 30th. And so our monthly payment schedules, we actually we sweep those. We pay energy suppliers on usually the 23rd or 24th of the month, and then we sweep the remaining funds to the operating account. So literally that is a week's worth of revenues coming in.
So it's coming out, going in. Okay, thank you. And then lastly, just to provide some context, that let's see, 17, 18, 19, 21, 22 million that's in delinquency, what % is that of our energy budget? Can you remember? It's like 450 million is around there is our energy budget.
I'm doing math off the top of my head. Yes, our energy budget is over $400 million. So it is.
So 400 or 22 and then 4, let's say it's 425. It's
probably less than 5%.
Yeah.
Around there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? I'll put it to the public first. And we have nobody. So it's just us tonight. All right. Summer, anybody on the CAC members have any questions? If not, we'll move on. Cynthia.
I just want to say that let me just say how pleased, but how well managed also we're doing here. I mean, we have 0 debt. We have, we have I guess, 155 million, if I'm reading this correctly, Howard, left over. Is that correct? After we pay our energy bills, looks like we're doing a very good job here, and I'm sure our credit rating is showing that also. So do you want to, are you in a position to make any comments about how we look overall to our creditors, or, you know, to the banks? It looks like we're doing very good here.
I would certainly agree. I think, you know, all of our counterparties, you know, Barclays, who is our banking relationship, you know, when we get projects financed, this is something that certainly gets scrutinized by really all, you know, all forms of counterparties in their credit departments, and they're always asking us, you know, send us your latest financials, talk us through your operations, and I think we've been able to negotiate very favorable terms. We didn't talk about this in our last item, but you know, in all cases, we do not agree to posting any form of buyer security, and that's fairly unique in the market if you don't have an actual investment grade credit rating. And so, you know, they look at our financials, they see how we're run, and they are generally, you know, counterparties have always gotten comfortable with that. So, you know, I think it is a very good sign and a showing, and that's one indication of that is through our PPA negotiations.
Thank you.
All right, Shiva.
Hi, Howard. Just a couple of questions. Is the 79,000 related in any way to the 155 million? Sorry, 79 million. Is it included in the 155?
It's related, but I wouldn't say it's sort of like inclusive per se. So these are lockbox funds. Basically means this is the customer cash that is received month by month, and it first goes under that lockbox account. So that's listed in the first table, says lockbox. But as Mary had asked, that $10 million is, I wouldn't compare the two. The $10 million is a snapshot in time as of June 30th. And every month we receive these funds. So April we receive, you know, close to $26 million, and that's an aggregate over the month. And as of like April 23rd, we go pay our energy suppliers from those funds directly, and then we sweep the remainder into our operating fund account. So I wouldn't try to connect the two too much. Okay.
So the next question is, I think Mary did a calculation, revenues or costs of about $450 million. So we have about 1/3 or 4 months of cash in hand to cover operations. Is that how to read the 155 versus 450 million?
That's generally correct. The clarification I would make is this is not our official cash as in terms of asset. This is just our cash balance sheet. So there are, sorry, this is just our cash statement. There are certain restricted funds we have here, and so it doesn't equate to the cash on the balance sheet exactly, but obviously it's pretty close. And so the way you thought about it is how we look at our days liquidity on hand. You look at your energy expense, or you look at your overall operating expenses for a year, and you see what your sort of, you know, how many days you could operate if you didn't bring in any more revenue. And so the way you kind of talk about that was correct. Yes.
Okay. Last question. The $22 million of delinquency, is that since inception of operations?
That's
okay.
correct. We haven't written off any debt.
Okay. So it's not truly 5%, it's probably 1.5% then, because it's over 3 years of operations.
That's right. And also the number we did, it was off of roughly expenses, not revenue. So, you know, this is, I think, what we have forecasted in terms of uncollectibles, which was pre-COVID at 0.5%, and during COVID has been at 2.5%, has been about the right level, we feel like, of covering, you know, this uncollectibles risk, just to give you a better sense of those metrics.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands, Cynthia, I think you're done. You want to put your hand down if you're done? All right. And Shiva, you can put your hand down too, unless you had another question. Thank you. All right, seeing no other hands, I'm going to move us on to our last main item, which is the prepaid transaction review. This has not been brought to the CAC before. It's a bit of a complex financial transaction that EBCE has been working on. It's been brought forward to the board. And it is an informational item for us, so you can understand and know what is being brought forward to the board on Wednesday. Howard, remind me, is this for action item for the board on Wednesday?
This is an action item to the board.
So the board has actually seen this a couple different times. But I had asked Howard to really delve into and provide the CAC with some good information in terms of what this is getting us.
Great. All right, so let's jump into it. As Mary prefaced, this is a pretty complex financial transaction, and we've taken this board more than just a couple of times. Actually, we've probably taken this, 6 to 8 times at this stage. We brought it forward to the executive committee. We've brought it forward to our finance and procurement subcommittee. We got feedback from the board. They want more repetitions with this, given the complexity of it, and so we took that feedback and presented a number of times. So I'm going to cover this at a pretty high level with you. I'm obviously happy to answer questions in any direction you'd like to take this, but we could spend hours on this topic, and I don't think you want to do that. So I'll try to keep it high level, and then you can tell me where you kind of want to delve in a little bit more. This particular presentation, what we're covering is the overview itself, kind of list of parties, list of key documents, some of the key risks, timeline, and then the specific requests that we're asking for here. If you want to go to the next slide, Adrian. So this is a bit of an eye chart, but let me walk you through the main points here. The energy prepay is a financial transaction whereby we are getting a discount on our procurement costs based off of the spread between taxable and tax-exempt borrowing costs. We are a nonprofit public agency, so we are a tax-exempt load-serving entity, so we're able to utilize this type of a structure. The way it works is you work with a financial counterparty. There are a few financial counterparties that do this type of transaction. We are working specifically with Morgan Stanley, and you basically sign a 30-year energy supply contract. You go out and borrow bonds to support those cash flows over a 30-year duration. And there is a spread, of course, between where Morgan Stanley's Treasury Department would be able to borrow rates and where we could borrow rates, and so that creates some value in between those two borrowing costs. And we then assign our power purchase agreements such as the agreements that we've already talked about, right? So we already have existing power purchase contracts that we're agreeing to pay for over the life of the contract, and we assign those through this financial transaction and ultimately get a discount on it. And the target discount that we have is a 10% discount. And so we're agreeing with Morgan Stanley basically to be an energy supplier over 30 years. We assign an existing PPA through Morgan Stanley. We go raise bonds ahead of time to do an energy prepay, and they're able to utilize those funds because that is at a lower borrowing cost than theirs, and that's how we achieve a discount through what we pay. A lot more boxes and arrows with how that all happens. There's an issuing conduit that we set up as a separate JPA that allows us to issue bonds off balance sheet. There's a lot of other counterparties involved, a swap counterparty, a custodian bank, things like that I'm happy to touch on. But just to keep it really at the heart of this is an energy prepay where we are agreeing with a financial counterparty to go raise tax-exempt bonds, give them the cash, and then they agree to pay us, deliver energy to us over a 30-year life. And we are really assigning in our power purchase agreements through this vehicle that they are then delivering back to us. And it is a structure that has been done for decades through the gas market. So gas prepays have been done nationwide by a number of financial counterparties, all generally municipal utilities. It's a newer transaction type to be applied towards renewable energy and electricity. So there's a little bit more like regulatory complexity to doing that because you have to keep the energy bundled, as an example that we're all aware of. And so, you know, those are things that we had to work through. But at the end of the day, it's the same type of transaction that's been done for decades by, you know, gas marketers. And now we're applying it to electricity, specifically to, you know, either large hydro or renewable energy in order to sort of extract that same value that other load serving entities have been able to do with gas. So that's the high level of it. What we touch on here on this specific slide is a little bit on that structure itself. We point to the IRS code specifically that actually codifies that this is legal and why we're allowed to do this. I touched on this is a 30-year transaction. One nuance here to note is based off of the tax-exempt spreads, it's actually optimal to do 5 to 10-year bond placements as opposed to a 30-year bond placement from day one. And really, they're looking at interest rate curves over a 30-year life to determine when the optimal points are. And so the little bit of risk I'll touch on is there's a repricing risk that happens depending on what that duration of that first bond is, somewhere between 5 and 10 years, that you have to go back out to market in that time frame, reissue bonds, and your discount can change. Now, there's no scenario where we lose money on this transaction. You know, for some reason, if your interest rates are inverted and that discount or that arbitrage value is not there, we're not at risk that we're paying more money, to be very clear. The risk, though, is that, you know, if it's poorly timed and, you know, there isn't value there, we don't get a discount. So that's the kind of the worst case scenario from a discount perspective. But it is a variable rate structure that gets reset, you know, somewhere between 2 and 4 times over the 30-year life. There is a minimum discount that the Morgan Stanley has to hit for us, and if they don't hit that, we actually have a walkaway right. So we do have, you know, certain provisions like that in there that further protect us. But you know, that's a risk I want to touch on. Just looking at the slide to see if I want to touch on any further details here. I think I've covered most of those points. So Adrian, if you can go to the next slide. Some of the key elements here that I'll highlight. I've already mentioned, you know, our existing PPAs are being assigned into the taxable prepaid supplier. And so we're really, you know, we're maintaining the same commodity contracts that we otherwise would have signed for the most part. It is a limited assignment of rights and energy products. And so, you know, we are not assigning, you know, our real obligations. If there's any disruption to the PPA, if there's any issue with our solvency, any issue with Morgan Stanley's solvency, any issue with the counterparty, the PPA seller solvency, the PPA really just gets put back. So it's not a true assignment with long, you know, where counterparties are changing their liability or their credit exposure. It is a limited assignment of energy product and payment flowing through, but all operational responsibilities still sit with the original parties for the most part. The last section here, I'll just, obviously very important point, the debt is non-recourse to EBCE. So this will not change our treasury report. That balance will still say 0 for debt because this is issued through a separate JPA that actually puts out the bonds, and the funds are actually delivered to Morgan Stanley. And so Morgan Stanley actually bears some risk that, you know, if there's some tax issue with this transaction, they have to repay those funds. It's not on EBCE in terms of that risk. Next slide, Adrian. A little bit on sizing. So what we're asking for approval from the board is to issue bond proceeds as high as 1.5 billion. This is being split between us and Silicon Valley. So this is an important point I failed to mention, but this is a joint transaction that we are doing with Silicon Valley. So whatever volumes we go out to market for in terms of a bond raise, it's going to be split in half between us. And so, you know, 1.5 billion is really the kind of the upper threshold of what Morgan Stanley has advised as kind of practical and reasonable in terms of bond market appetite. I think realistically, we would expect to be somewhere in the 600 million to 1 billion level. And then again, that would get further split between us and Silicon Valley. So, you know, it's probably more in the $300 to $500 million size for EBC on a standalone basis. That has an escalated sort of cash flow over a 30-year life. But just to give you a sense of the sizing, in year one, your volumes tend to be lower in terms of what you assign in, and then year 30, the volumes increase pretty significantly, you know, over time. But in year one, I would expect to assign in somewhere between 12 and $16 million worth of procurement costs. It can be higher than that. That's more based off of that kind of $600 to $800 million bond size, of which we take half. So if it was closer to 1.5 billion, it certainly could, you know, you could sort of double those levels. And for that, as I noted before, our target savings are about 10%. So you get savings about 1.2 to 1.6 million dollars a year. Our hope and intent is that we'll do multiple prepaid transactions like this over the course of the next, 2, 5, 10 years. So you can increase those volumes for what we're procuring energy-wise anyways, and then you would obviously increase those savings that we'd be getting to make it even more meaningful. Next slide, Adrian. Some of the parties that I'll just highlight here, some of which I've already noted, but our joint prepaid buyer is Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Our prepaid supplier is Morgan Stanley. We work with a number of different advisors and consultants, given the complexity of this, to diligence documents and advise us, one of which is our financial advisor, that's PFM. We've worked with them in the past. We have counsel, bond counsel and tax counsel, which is Oric. We have disclosure and issuers counsel, which is Chapman. We have a bond issuer, this is the JPA I referenced, called the California Community Choice Financing Authority, CCCFA. That is a JPA that we formed with 3 other CCAs recently. That is to issue the actual bonds and make sure that it's off balance sheet. We have a custodian that's to be selected. It's a bank that will help manage payments. There's a commodity swap counterparty that does fix the floating swaps. And there's a credit rating agency that looks specifically at the transaction to rate. So they're not rating us as an entity, but the transaction itself, which is typical for any bonds. What we're specifically requesting approval on, Adrian, if you can go to the next slide, are 5 documents. These are the 5 documents. I'm not going to go into detail on these, but these are the core documents. There's a 30-year power supply contract. That's one of the most important ones. You can see kind of who the counterparties that sign these things are. There's a letter agreement between us and Morgan Stanley about how we assign in contracts. There's the actual form of limited assignment that we would sign with a PPA counterparty. There's a project administration agreement that is signed between us and Silicon Valley and our issuer, so that we can coordinate activities. And then there's a custodial agreement that we sign with Morgan Stanley and the custodial bank that really talks about flow of funds with the PPA payments and such. So these are the only documents that EBC is actually a counterparty to. So this is what we're explicitly requesting approval on from the board. And then go to the next slide, Adrian. And then there are about 20 other documents that are actually signed through this transaction, many of which are signed actually by the CCCFA JPA. This is a sampling of some of those. The prepaid agreement is actually the document that really mirrors the power supply contract, which is what we signed with the issuer. And then the issuer signs this contract with Morgan Stanley, sort of back-to-backs it. There's a repricing agreement that talks about, what I mentioned, with every 5 to 10 years, it gets repriced. And so there are terms as to how that gets repriced. The trust indentures, the actual bond document. And then there's, swap documents I mentioned. There's a parent level guarantee that Morgan Stanley provides. There's custodial agreements as to how the bank, controls the bank accounts. And the next slide, Adrian. The last one is a preliminary offering statement. If you really want to get into the weeds of this, I would suggest you read this document first. This really is a summary disclosure and marketing document that is ultimately will be utilized by Morgan Stanley to go out to bond investors. This is the document sort of captures everything. So if you have trouble sleeping, this is the one to start reading first. And then you can move on from there if you really want. Next slide, Adrian. Some of the key risks, I touched on some of these things. The first one really is out-of-pocket costs are pretty minimal. these most of the fees that we have associated with the consultants are a success are deal contingent. So if the bonds get placed, then we pay them. If they don't, we have pretty minimal out of pocket expenses. The biggest risk I would say is really that a better transaction comes out in 5, 10, 20 years, and we have a lot of energy costs flowing through this transaction structure. That if there's a better way to get tax value out, we won't be able to do that. I would say so. It's opportunity cost is what I think is the greatest value, greatest risk here. I think that's mitigated because we have a lot of procurement costs that we're going to phase in over time. So the reality is, if a new structure came out in 10 years, we're still going to have energy costs that we haven't flowed through here that we can flow through that type of structure. So I don't think that risk is too significant, but it is a risk. Other risks are load loss. If we couldn't assign a PPA in, most of that risk is borne by Morgan Stanley. It would make the transaction potentially collapse in a real catastrophic situation. Most of that risk does not sit to us, but we do have an obligation to assign in PPAs and make sure we're negotiating with our counterparties to do so. The regulatory risk I mentioned, to the extent because you're flowing this through a financial transaction and back to us, the CPUC could say, well, that's no longer a bundled REC. You had to flow that through. They could take a view that that didn't satisfy some of our PCC1 obligations or some of the SB 350 long-term contracting obligations. We have met with the CPUC. Multiple CCAs have. We don't think that's a material risk. We've gotten them. They're never going to issue a letter that de-risks that 100%, unfortunately, until they have to go and actually diligence all the documents. But we think it is a minimal risk, and we have properly had those conversations. The last one I'll just say is general political risk, right? I mean, this is, at the end of the day, this is a sort of a tax-related transaction. Could the IRS come down on this and say this is not a legitimate transaction? That is possible. That is why we have hired one of the most prominent tax counsels out there, which is ORIC. They are the preeminent law firm that has written all of the tax opinions for these types of transactions for all of the gas prepays. So we think that is a pretty low risk. They're a pretty conservative law firm, but it is a risk nonetheless to highlight. Next slide, Adrian. In terms of benefits, I've already touched on this. The benefit really is a discount in our energy costs, right? So we are targeting an 8 to 12% discount on our energy costs. At the end of the day, this is something that the gas market has done for decades. We want to do this for renewable energy. This is a structural advantage we have relative to IOUs. IOUs cannot do this, obviously. They are taxable entities. So we feel like it is important to have put in this diligence, which this transaction has literally been over 12 months, about a year and a half of diligence that we've been working at this type of a transaction. So we think there's a structural advantage here that we think it is worthwhile to, of course, move forward with this type of a transaction and ensure that we can continue to compete, relative to PG&E and other, taxable entities. The debt is non-recourse. I've already mentioned that. Other agencies have done this types of deals, such as SMUD and SCAPA. So, large tax-exempt load-serving entities in California have done this. Next slide, Adrian. There's just a couple more here. The timeline here, we're moving forward with board approval in 2 days, of course. Silicon Valley is going to move forward with their board approval in a couple of weeks in August. We will have to get board approval from the separate JPA I mentioned. We'll do that in the August timeframe at this stage. The bond raise initiation of the prepay, we're expecting probably the next 2 to 3 months. It's all based off of market conditions of bond markets, which have been closed for the last year. So we couldn't have done this. There wasn't sufficient spread there. But markets have reopened up over the last couple of years. But that is a factor, of course. We want to get this authorized and enabled, and then we'll just kind of wait for bond markets to really be as favorable as we can get them. And the last page, Adrian, this is just formalizing the actual explicit approval that is detailed in the resolution itself. But these are the 5 agreements that I touched on briefly earlier of what we're actually asking the board to authorize us to execute. And then there's a couple parameters that are important. The last 2 bullets on the slide. One is the principal amount of the bonds that we're asking for approval for are up to 1.25 billion. That equates to about 1.5 billion in proceeds. And then the discount is $3 per megawatt hour, which is what we're asking for the board to approve as a parameter. So if the discount is less than that, we would not move forward on it. we are hopefully targeting something, you know, in the high threes, more like the $4 range for discount, but, you know, coming in with sort of a floor of $3 per megawatt hour. And that is it. The whole board packet, as you'll notice, is over 400 pages. So I'll let you read that at your leisure, but, you know, there are obviously a number of things we can touch on if you want to go into more detail. So I'll look to you.
Great. Thank you, Howard. And again, this is an informational item for us. So questions, I think Howard said one of the important points that I don't remember you saying before, I'm sure you did, was that this is something that as a load serving entity that is a CCA can do, and the investor owned utilities can't. And so it can help us reduce our costs. Shiva.
Yes, hi. Hi, Howard. This is good. I like the structure. I'm familiar with this. Palo Alto has done a gas PPA in the past, gas prepay in the past, and it has performed well. So I hope this comes through. My question is the $3, is the market currently there to get a 10% discount? What is it now?
It's close. So, you know, there have been a few transactions that have priced in the last month or two, but there's quite a bit of volatility in the market. So it's hard to say, but it was around 10%, which is more like around the $4 level about a month ago. Unfortunately, as things were going the right direction with that transaction over the last couple of weeks, you've heard from Morgan Stanley, they've gone in the wrong direction. So there's putting some downward pressure on that, which is why they suggested a $3 per megawatt sort of floor. But you know, these things are totally unpredictable. So you know, it's what is our ability to predict interest rates, right? So I think we would, you know, generally you would think we're in a rising interest rate environment right now, since rates have been historically low levels. But there's a lot of volatility up and down, kind of month to month to that. So it's pretty unpredictable. Which is why we really want to just get enabled with this. They can start having some conversations out in the market with some of the materials. If the pricing is not there, we'll wait. You know, we could wait a month, 2 months, 6 months. So, you know, we have to kind of wait and see, unfortunately. But best to be enabled so we can kind of jump in the market when we see the timing is right.
Great strategy. Congratulations.
Joel.
Yes. So this is an interesting presentation and a very interesting concept. I'm not very familiar with that. Also, I might have missed some key point. So my questions are, I still don't see the benefit of doing that. It sounds like we want to raise a bond and to prepay the energy. Is that a prepay the electricity only or prepay the gas? And what are the benefits for our taxpayers?
So our transaction is just electricity based. I referenced gas prepays because that's a common structure in the market and has been done for a longer period of time, but that's not what we're doing, just to be clear. But you know, it's the same structure that has been applied to gas markets that we're applying to electricity. So that's one. And two, the benefit is a discount on our procurement costs. So because we are doing a tax exempt debt raise and we are placing those funds with a taxable entity, they're getting value in being able to utilize those funds. And therefore they are giving us a discount on the energy that we are ultimately paying for. So, you know, that is as simple as you know, in terms of our intent, right, is to get a up to 10%, I shouldn't say up to 10%, a target of 10%. It could hopefully be greater than that, but it's a 10% of the procurement costs that we're assigning through this transaction.
So 10% is after paying all the fees, paying to the bank and paying to agencies.
Yeah, that's net of the transaction costs associated with, you know, all the sort of counsel and advisors and such.
Okay, and it seems that you list some other CCAs who has done that. So how many of those CAAs has done it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So no CCAs have done it yet. MCE is ahead of us, a little bit ahead of us, and they are working with Goldman Sachs on their transaction. So I would expect that they'll probably, I think they already got board approval. And actually this week they're going to get approval from, or they're seeking approval from the JPA that I talked about, the issuing conduit. So they're probably a month or two ahead of us in this process. So I would expect that they'll end up getting to market before us. And then we are, as I noted, we're doing this transaction jointly with Silicon Valley. I think that was done in part because this is the first transaction. We wanted to be a little bit risk averse and diligence the transaction together, get extra eyes on it, given the complexity of the documents and everything, and just do lower volumes, given it's our first time. That really is the reason. There are other CCAs that have quite a bit of interest in this. I would say, 3 or 4 additional CCAs are currently looking and diligencing the transactions at some stage.
So no other CCA has done it. Where is the 10% figure coming from?
It's all based off of bond markets and taxable versus tax exempt debt spreads. It's a pretty.
The other thing though, Joel, is there have been 2 public power agencies that have done it. SMUD, which is a municipally owned utility. SMUD has done it, and then SCAPA. And SCAPA is down south, and SCAPA is made up of a number of publicly owned utilities in south. So they've done it, but my guess is they're not sharing their percents.
Well, no, actually, these transactions all end up being public.
All
The
public?
public entities, our discount will end up being public when we
Okay.
price the transaction. Generally all debt that is raised from a public load, tax exempt load serving entity in California has to be fully disclosed. So it will be fully public. All the transactions in the past have been public. So that's why 10% is very, we know it to be sort of market. You can apply the discounts from gas prepays towards our electricity transaction. It's irrelevant what we're signing in. The discount is all determined based off of the taxable and tax exempt spreads. So, so there's good proxies in the market that tell us that 10% is a reasonable target. But again, it is just a target. When they go out to market and go raise bonds, that will determine what the actual discount is. It could be higher or lower than that. The proxies that we've been looking at are not California-based entities. So they're different bond investors in California versus other markets. And so, it's not a perfect proxy, but it's an estimate.
Okay, and you mentioned there is some risk whether this will be approved by government or ARS, and so sounds like that's still unknown or uncharted territory.
No, that's not correct. So IRS does not approve the transaction. IRS can say that we didn't do it right later, and say that there's risk to the bond staying outstanding, but the IRS does not approve the transaction. And
Okay.
just to be clear, dozens of these transactions have been done over decades. There's not been any disruption. The IRS has never taken a view that these transactions were done incorrectly. But I'm just pointing to very, very low probability tail risk, since it's appropriate to be transparent. But we see that risk as very, very low.
Okay, and so if the board approved, and then we start the process, and then if everything goes smoothly, and then that's just like any other bond initiatives that will become a measure and will be voted by the voters. Is that kind of the route going through that?
No, that's not correct. So this bond is all off balance sheet, is issued by an issuing conduit, the CCCFA, and then the funds are delivered to Morgan Stanley. So it's not on balance sheet for us. So what we're seeking approval for is not technically to go issue bonds. What we're asking for approval for are the 5 documents that were laid out in the specific transaction. And there's no voter approval associated with this because it's issued by an issuing conduit.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Not on balance sheet for us. So.
Thank you, Joel. Any other questions? All right, seeing no hands, I'm going to move us on to the last item of our agenda today. Oops, Aunt Olivia, question?
Whoever came up with the idea of utilizing this existing tool and applying it to renewables is genius. And that's really clever. And it is exceptionally nice to see us take full advantage of the opportunities that are provided by having a different community-based structure than the IOUs. And that is a really proactive step, and I don't understand all of the intricacies of it, but as it is an existing process, I'm really pretty excited about it and look forward to learning more. So thanks whoever did that. That was awesome.
Great. Thank you, Anna Olivia. I concur.
I won't take credit for the innovation, just to be clear. I'm just the expert.
Can you point to who did, or does
well, I mean, this is really, you know, from the gas prepay market. So I don't know where the idea really was initially conceived, but
we decided to look at on the electrical side. So I think it'll be great. Yep. All right, our last item, and we're only 2 minutes over tonight, is any member or staff announcements, including requests to put items on the future CAC agenda. I've already made myself a note that I'm going to bring forward other opportunities that EBCE is looking at to replace the termination of the OCEI peaker plant in Jack London Square. So that one's on there for September. Anything else? Cynthia, and then Anna Olivia.
Yes, I would like to have an update on the status of the in-house call center in Alameda County. You know, bringing the call center into our county versus the SMUD contracting out now.
Yep, I might be able to just figure that out and email it to you, Cynthia, because I know you've been really following this, and then I can bring it back as a chair point, because I'm pretty sure there's stuff going on, but I'm not 100% positive. I can check. Thank you, Cynthia. Anything else?
So that'll be in our next. You'll bring that back on in the.
Yeah, I may be able to get you information earlier, and if I do, then
okay.
I'll let everybody else on the CEC know what I passed on.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Anna Olivia.
I just want to bring back something that you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, Mary, and ask for clarification on how the chair nominations will work. Like, if there's somebody that we think would be good, can, you know, so long as we're not group, you know, breaking any Brown Act stuff, could we approach that person? I was chair for 2 years prior to Mary. It's a really wonderful experience, and you do not need to be a technical expert. So I just really want to say everyone on this body is here because of the perspective that they bring, whatever that perspective is. So you are an expert in you, and that is who we want here. So please consider running for chair. It's awesome. You will receive support. And how will the process work, and can we nominate people?
The process will work similar to what we've done before. During the meeting, we will ask for nominations. It is a good idea to have, if you're going to nominate somebody, to actually talk to them in advance and see if they're interested. Or if they're perhaps interested to be vice chair or something like that. So I don't see any problem with anybody talking with anybody else on the CAC to see if they're interested. Adrian, can you see any issues with the Brown Act and serial discussions on this? I mean, you can ask anybody, you just don't want to like say so-and-so said this and then so-and-so said that.
You just don't want to coordinate votes or actions. But I think that
just want to be careful not to make sure you're not coming to any agreements, you're not deliberating amongst multiple parties or anything like that.
Right. So individually, you can definitely, I mean, anybody can contact me. I can tell you what it's about, and anybody can contact somebody else to see if they're interested, but you can't really talk as a group. Does that help, Anna Olivia?
Yeah, and I am familiar with the process, but I am aware that the majority of people here are not familiar with it. So it is a wonderful thing to do, and I just really want to encourage folks to consider it.
Great, thank you.
I wonder, Mary, since we don't have the full cohort here this evening, if we could send out an email reminder to the CAC, just letting everybody know that that's coming up in September.
Yeah, because it's Ernie and William that are not here. Their alternates are here. But I think we have everybody else. Or we did at the beginning of the meeting.
It'd still be great to send it out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that.
And didn't we put together like a description of the roles?
We talked about it. I don't think that I actually ever did it, but you and I can do that, and then ask Adrian to send it out. I think Aunt Olivia might have provided me with something before I became chair, and I'll go back and look at my notes as well.
Yeah, we did put together an introduction packet that was to be given to members when they joined the board. It was just a long time ago that we had any new members. So I can look through and try and dig that back up too, because it's a welcome to the CAC here kind of packet.
Yeah, we actually have a packet that was put together for folks on it, and people actually had a video conference around some of it with Alex, but I don't remember, Anne Olivia, if information about what it means to be chair and vice chair were in that.
Yeah, it's in the policies and procedures document. I'll look for it, send it out.
Okay.
Yeah, I
appreciate it. Thank you.
At some point before I was vice chair, so.
Yeah, so Adrian, I'll be getting something to you about that we're going to ask you to send out to the CAC.
Great, thank you.
All right, Shiva, your hand is up.
Yes, do we have the contact information of all the CAC members if you need to individually?
Adrian has it.
Yeah.
So Adrian, we talked about this. We're not actively sharing people's emails with the public. But truthfully, if you get the invite for this meeting, the one that shows all our names, our email addresses are right there.
Okay.
So I mean, I feel like, Adrian, we can easily send out the email addresses to the CAC members of CAC members.
Okay.
Do you know if that's in violation?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
Having the contact information is certainly not in violation. You just want to be cautious. You're not creating an email chain where you're emailing everyone and people start deliberating on email.
Yeah.
That would be the only caution, but.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, actually, I take it back. The emails aren't there. It's just names. I was thinking they were at one point. Mine is on there. Okay, so if you can get out the names and emails to folks, that would be great, Adrian. And no serial conversations. Anything else? No, seeing no hands. We are adjourned to Monday, September 13th. Don't forget about the September 2nd meeting that's prior to this about environmental and social justice metrics. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a good summer.
Good night.
Have a good-
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you, Adrian.